Welcome to Attican Plays Railway Empire. Alright, hi, this is Attican. Welcome to another Railway Empire video. I thought it might be fun after playing the Viva Mexico scenario using this sort of pass-through rural station idea. I thought it might be fun to go back and play one of the campaign missions and apply that strategy to it and see how it holds up. So I'm going to go back and play the third mission, which is the Over the Mississippi mission. And in this one, we have to basically help build the bridge at Rock Island across the Mississippi. We're restricted. We're not allowed to build bridges across the Mississippi. So we have to have a special case to build a bridge. And we have to basically supply some lumber to Rock Island. So we've got a bunch of tasks here. We're supposed to grow Toledo. We're going to connect 250,000 people to our network. We have to connect at least 10 rural businesses to our network. So I thought it might be a good application of the new strategy that we've just started using with that last Viva Mexico a playthrough. And I think I'm going to call this the Cave method. It's either Cave or Kawe, but I'm going to call it Cave, and correct me if I'm wrong, please. But Cave pointed out that long ago he'd actually written to me about doing something like this. I didn't quite catch what he was saying. I didn't understand what he had written, so I kind of didn't think about it anymore, and we didn't discuss it any further. And then after I did this, he pointed out that that's exactly what he was talking about. So basically what we got here is, if you haven't seen the Viva Mexico, the second Viva Mexico playthrough, what we're going to do here is, rather than using pass-through warehouses, which is one of the techniques that we use, we're doing pass-through rural stations, meaning that when I connect two cities, I'm looking for a raw material that both cities can use in the middle, and then going through that station to get to the city. And in fact, this one I took it even one step further. I'm only using small stations for the pass-through. So basically I've got a small station there on wheat, and I've got a line here between Toledo and Grand Rapids that passes through that wheat station. So the concept is that our first train in Toledo will grab any passengers and mail and goods that it has. It'll run up to the wheat farm, top itself off with wheat, take that to Grand Rapids, unload everything in Grand Rapids. Grand Rapids will then get any passengers, mail, and manufactured goods that are needed in Toledo. It'll take off, stop in that wheat farm, and top off its load with wheat for Toledo. And this will go back and forth with every train on that line. So we set up a line there, put 4 trains on it. Those trains are going to run back and forth, and they will be basically full all the time. So now we've got 4 profitable trains. Now we're going to run another line and do the exact same thing with the exact same 2 cities. And this time we're going to run corn. So we're going to have a line from Toledo that goes through the corn station and then passes through and moves out the other side and goes on to Grand Rapids. And trains on that line will do the same thing. They'll take any available passengers' mail, grab any available manufactured goods, go to the corn farm, top off with corn, and go on to the next city. So that way we're supplying corn to both cities, and we've got trains that are running pretty close to full all the time on this line. And we'll go on and on with that. Now, the other thing was, I think I said this, one of our goals is to quickly connect 10 rural businesses to our network. And by using this method, obviously, we've already got 2 by using this method. Now, if we were just doing like a rapid expansion, we would have 0, and we would continue to have 0 until we had like 5 cities connected, and then we'd go back and do wheat and cattle and start connecting businesses. This method really is a beautiful fit for the scenario because of that early requirement to hook up a lot of rural stations. But the big thing about it is, the whole concept is that you're running full trains, that these trains tend to be full or very close to full all the time, because those cities can always use some more raw materials. And you try to get, of course, raw materials that are very useful, particularly those early ones, obviously wheat, cattle, corn, logs, and then later, a little later, sugar and fruit and what have you. But at any rate, these are really inexpensive pass-through warehouses in effect, because we're going to be running full trains with those goods on them. Now, some of you might be thinking, oh, but you just created this horrible bottleneck. Now you've got this single line station. Every train has to go through it and stop there, and all these other trains are going to get queued up and stopped. And I would say to you, no, that isn't what's going to happen, because think about, like, for example, the two that we just set up. We've got a wheat line and a corn line between Grand Rapids and Toledo. There are only 4 trains on that wheat line. There are only 2 trains on that corn line. So basically, we've got 6 trains running back and forth between Grand Rapids and Toledo at this point. Now we're getting ready to change that. We've got 6 trains running, but 4 of them are on their own dedicated line. The other 2 are on their own dedicated line. So there's not going to be a lot of traffic tie-ups at the stations for sure. And secondly, if you think about 4 trains running all the way back and forth between 2 cities, it's not like all 4 of them are going to be sitting there in the middle waiting on loading up for wheat outside Toledo. So you get surprisingly good flow from this. And of course, it's a big reason because we have pretty dedicated lines. Now here I'm actually going to merge. Here we're going to actually use the second half of that corn line and hook in going down to Toledo. We're going to merge into that because we swung over here and got sugar, but now we can take advantage of that line that's already existing. It only has 2 trains on it, and run a couple of trains between Grand Rapids and Toledo for the sugar down here. And all we have to do is merge in and take advantage of that line right there. Should not have a ton of traffic. That still is only going to be 4 trains max coming through there into that line going into Toledo, and only 2 on the other end of it out there toward Grand Rapids. So the traffic should flow very, very well, and more to the point, full trains running all the time. And when I say full trains, they're not full their entire trip, but when they hit the station to unload, then they should be full or very close to it almost every trip. So now we need meat or cattle for the meat industry in Toledo. We also have one of our objectives is to hook up Chicago, St. Louis, and Louisville into our network. So what we're going to do here is build a line that goes out from Toledo through the cattle and goes on to Louisville. So that way we have our cattle line. That line, we can run enough trains on that to keep the cattle flowing into Toledo. Now this one isn't quite as good because this one, Louisville doesn't actually need the cattle. That's okay. The main purpose of this is to feed the cattle back to Toledo, because another objective we have is to grow Toledo to 100,000. And it's an optional objective, but we want to hit it just the same. So we're going to set up this line passing through that station, and I was originally going to run it to Indianapolis, and then I realized I've got that whole requirement. Here I am double checking it. I've got that requirement to go Chicago, St. Louis, and Louisville connected to our network, so why not? We'll just skip Indianapolis and head on down here to Louisville. Now, if we were playing this map without those requirements, that specific requirement, we might indeed go the shorter line to Indianapolis, run a pass through there, and then we could connect Indianapolis and Louisville with its own line. Now here is the other thing we have to do. We have to supply lumber to Rock Island, as I said, to build that bridge. Well, here's a great case. We're going to hook up with Louisville anyway. Louisville has an empty slot. It's got a wide open slot that we can put an industry in without having to buy it and destroy it and put something else in or whatever. We can just do our thing in Louisville with the lumber business down there and have one going. And if you have noticed, there's actually a logging camp or logging rural business out there just down to the, what would that be? That would be the east, just to the east of Louisville. There is a logging camp, so we can run logs straight over into that business that we now own because we just bought the business. So we have a logging business, a lumber business in Louisville, and we have the ability to send the logs in there to the sawmill. Once we go over and set it up out there to the east. So now we have the ability to create that lumber and get that going early and have that lined up so that when Rock Island opens up, we can ship our lumber. And I probably should tell you, now obviously I've played this thing before and a couple of times. And I have a couple of other videos on this, in fact. But we know that Rock Island right now is not open to us. We can't even build there. We can't even connect to Rock Island. We also know that's where the bridge is going to take place, and we have to ship that lumber there so they can build the bridge. Well, to get that lumber ready timely, we're going to go ahead and get our lumber business going, and it's going to be our lumber business, so we'll get that going right now. And here's our pass-through line going through that cattle. Now, that's not helping Louisville a whole lot, but it's certainly going to help Toledo, and it's going to make money for us regardless. So now we've got another line going with more profitable trains running. So we've got 4 trains running back and forth to main reason to take cattle to Toledo. Now, here's that logging business, and I was tempted to actually do a pass through here between Louisville and Toledo, another one, but I decided to just go ahead and run straight in because that lumber business is so important for us. So I'm going to run just a basic freight line for logs into Louisville, and that way our sawmill can get plenty of supply and be able to produce and have those ready to be shipped when we're ready to start our connection to Rock Island. Now, the way a lot of people play this one, and I've played it this way before as well, there's Madison, Wisconsin is just up there to the north of Chicago, and a lot of people will go up there because there's a couple of logging camps up near that and work on either growing Madison to put a sawmill in there, or buying the existing meat industry in Madison and tearing it down and putting in a sawmill. Either way you go, your goal is to have a lumber business close to Rock Island that you can ship down there as soon as it's available to you. But in setting up this line to Louisville that I was going to do anyway, I realized I can own this lumber mill and set it up right now, and not even have to mess with Madison. So I decided to go that way. Plus, it's just something different. It's a different way to do it. So now we've got another pass-through going through the cattle between Toledo and Louisville, and we've got a direct shipment of logs into Louisville. And there you can see how Rock Island there is kind of hashed out. We're not allowed to build in there. I was just confirming that to make sure I couldn't go ahead and start shipping stuff yet. So I'm looking for the best place to go next. And I decide to go, I'm looking ahead at that wheat, but I decide to go ahead and go from Louisville over to St. Louis. Remember, we want to connect St. Louis into our network. So we're going to do a pass through those veggies. And the veggies, they're just an opportunity. They're not really going to help either city right off the bat. Both cities are too small, particularly St. Louis, to use the veggies. So basically they'll just stop and not load anything, but as the cities grow, then that'll change and they'll start shipping vegetables back and forth. But it was the most direct, simplest way to get our little pass-through rural station. I really am trying to follow this strategy as far as it'll go and as much as it makes sense. So we've got we've got a wheat and a corn and a sugar between Grand Rapids and Toledo. We've got a cattle between Toledo and Louisville, and we've got a direct line of logs into Louisville, and now we're getting a vegetable line between Louisville and St. Louis. And we know in St. Louis, we're going to turn back up there to the north and go towards Chicago. So we're kind of turning our station around that way. And I actually goofed up here. I thought that would be fine. I could put another station in there back to back. With that, as you'll see later, this was actually a mild goof up. I didn't move it far enough to the west, and it's actually the only one I could put in. It didn't matter. I mean, one station is more than enough to get this done. But I think if I was playing trying to actually build up the whole map, I would be a little ticked at myself for not leaving more space there. But no matter. So here we're running in, tying off right there at our little small station. And now we got to wait for some money. We've gone through our money pretty quickly, but notice here too, it's only April of the first year. So basically in our first quarter of existence, we've hooked up we've hooked up 3 cities with 4 with 4 pass-through lines and a dedicated log line already. And I'm getting messages for missing equipment, meaning I forgot supply towers. And this is another one where I get sloppy with the supply towers and kind of forget what I'm doing a couple of times. So again, we're waiting on the money so that we can finish off this line and start running trains there. Remember too, one of our strategies is if 2 cities are worth connecting, they're worth double tracking, and they're worth running trains. In other words, we don't want one of these one train running back and forth things that is never going to repay. You're never going to recoup your money. We want double track and multiple trains running so we can make a profit. And right now, again, we have hit that point where we've kind of spent all our money. We spent all our initial money, and we spent the money from our 2 bonds. So now we just have to wait for our economy to start proving itself, if you will. Those trains to start bringing the money in at a faster pace. And don't worry, it will happen. But right now, we're in that kind of natural slowdown period where you just have to be patient for a little bit, knowing that you've got a good, solid foundation set up, but you just have to wait a little bit for the money to start coming in. In other words, we are certainly not at that point where the money's coming in faster than we can spend it. But the good news is, even in this little quick thing, it'll happen. And we'll run 4 trains here because we want the traffic. They'll all make a profit, but since it's veggies, it's not going to be great. We would be tempted to run 6 on that long line if it was through a better pass-through, like if it was through a wheat or a cattle. And here's where I realized, I didn't leave enough space. See, I just don't have enough space to go back to back the way you'd like to. So we'll just have to expand the station that we do have. And we're going to do a pass-through through cattle again because Chicago has a meat industry. So here we can see our goals of the 10 rural businesses and 500,000 people connected to our network. And there we just hit that, I'm sorry, 250,000 people connected to our network. And as soon as we got the huge city, Chicago, that was almost a gimme as soon as you connect Chicago. But keep in mind, we've got Chicago, Grand Rapids, Louisville, Toledo, and St. Louis. So we've got 5 cities already connected. So we've done basically a rapid expansion, 5-city rapid expansion, kind of classic. The only difference is we've used our cave approach for going through these little pass-through rural stations. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the advantage of this. Now the disadvantage, I think you kind of lose a little bit of control about exactly what you're feeding to each city. A pass-through warehouse is just beautiful because our kind of our KUU pass-through warehouse, if you will, those things are beautiful because you know what 6 items you're putting in there. You know you're distributing them to both cities, and so it's really easy to focus and grow 2 cities that way. But the beauty of these pass-through rural stations is that, one, full trains. Full trains are profitable trains, and you're coming very, very close to having full trains all the time when you use this kind of an approach. And secondly, cheaper lines, because we would be building, if we weren't doing this approach, we would be building a line between Chicago and St. Louis anyway. And then we would build a separate line between that cattle ranch and Chicago. So we would have to have the same number of stations, right? We'd have to have stations in each of the cities and a station at the cattle ranch. But we'd also have to have that additional set of track to run our cattle went through. Or we could, double up on the other line that we had. But this way, we've got this one line that's going to be very efficient, have these trains that are just going to constantly be filling themselves up, running back and forth here. There you can see one with, that one's heading up to Chicago. It's got one car of passengers, 1 car of mail, and then it filled up with 6 cars of cattle. So that's the idea, run full trains. And the really great ones, the wheat lines, corn, logs, those will be full virtually the whole game, every train. So anyway, so here we've got our 5 cities set up. We've hit our 250,000 people connected to our network goal. We're well on our way to getting our 10 rural stations, and we've been able to do that while at the same time connecting 5 cities in doing basically a classic rapid expansion. So now with that connection to Chicago, we get a message saying that Rock Island has now opened up for us. So what we're going to do here is run a line through, we're going to continue with our cave approach. We're going to run a line through that wheat. Wheat's a great one. Every city needs wheat, and there's even beer up there in Rock Island. That's even better. Although this one isn't going to be quite the same because this is going to be a special line, and you'll see why when it comes to the lumber that we have to haul. But at any rate, we're going to set it up the same way with a pass-through so that we can, at a minimum, bring wheat back to Louisville. And of course, if we weren't doing our special case with the lumber, we would be bringing wheat to Rock Island as well. You've probably noticed I've gone into my options and turned off all the comments that the AI characters make. I finally got tired of them. Some of them are kind of cute, but I think we could all agree that Beatrix at some point just absolutely makes you want to throw up. So I had to turn them off so I didn't have to listen to them. So now again, we're setting up a cattle pass-through, or sorry, wheat pass-through between Louisville and Rock Island. And this one's a crucial line that we have to have. This will be our 6th city in our little network already, and we're still in our first year.
Looks pretty amateurish to me.
And we're still waiting on money, but you'll notice it is coming faster now. We're starting to gain momentum as our trains are starting to hit those stations and come in running nice and full. And I decided to go ahead and use our little flat technique for the crossing. I've had discussions with some of you. I apologize, I can't remember the name of the person who commented, but they said, why would you use that? Why wouldn't you just build a bridge? And I honestly would agree that basically building a bridge allows you to avoid the any intersection here and any delays. But it kind of looks nice like that. The flat one looks nice, and also we're just not running that much traffic here. I mean, there's not so many trains running here that there's going to be some big tie up there. And plus it just because it's new again, I'm going to run the kind of the crossing, the X crossing, where you can kind of flatten it out. So you set it up, and then you take either the tunnel or the bridge that gets built, and then you flatten that, and it gives you what you want. So you can see we've already done our Chicago, St. Louis, Louisville optional task. We've already hit our 250,000, and we're very close on our, we're 8 out of 10, I think it was, on our raw materials that we need to hook up to our lines. And I was checking it. Now here's the thing about this this deal. You can't do doubles. You can't actually. I mean, you can. You can have two tracks that cross two tracks like that, but they have to be separated. They won't go together side by side and make a true X. So decided to just go ahead and kind of tie them off at each end. So a train that's coming through and having to wait would have to wait anyway. Again, it's not going to be an issue. There's not going to be a lot of tie-up. It could be a potential. I mean, it certainly has more potential. If we had a bridge there would be nothing. There would be no intersection, and that would probably be the smarter way to go. But nobody accused me of being smart. So we're going to go with this new functionality they gave us here. We're going to use it again here in a little bit for something else as well. Okay, so now we're going to set up our pass-through line, but this one, we're going to cheat on this one. This one isn't going to be a true pass-through because we're going to prioritize lumber out of Louisville, and we're going to force it to run full. So this is a specialty technique we use sometimes when we have a specific goal in mind. So we're going to force the train to be full. Now, it could be full of passengers and mail. That would be okay. But its priority is grab any lumber you have, so it'll tend to grab 8 boxcars of lumber and run. And we're actually going to run 7 trains here, so that when that last train goes, there's a good chance that we've hit our 50. Now, we may not hit it totally because again, we may end up being, some of it will be passengers and mail, but we're going to run a bunch of trains on that line. Now, this is a special case. Now, if we didn't have that shipping that lumber requirement, we would maybe run 6 trains just normal, and then they would go up there and maybe grab some wheat and in both directions and take wheat to Rock Island, which would be a wonderful thing. It's exactly what we'd want to happen if we were trying to grow Rock Island, but that's not the point of this particular mission, so that's not what we're doing. You'll notice too, I've sort of ignored my employees. I just shame on them. Gets them out of practice a little bit. And I've got some research stacked up I need to take advantage of. But now I'm looking back, and we're going to make sure we get all our optional objectives. So growing Toledo, I want to make sure Toledo's getting what it needs, and the biggest thing it needs right now is cotton, because it has a textile plant. So there's a textile plant in Toledo. So we're going to run cotton down there, and we're going to we're going to run next to, we're going to have a dedicated line running down parallel to this wheat line coming out of Grand Rapids, and we're going to go down here and hook into Toledo and deliver cotton into Toledo to support that textile business, which will really help its demand satisfaction. You see, we're starting to get some breakdowns from bad conditions. You'll notice I haven't put any maintenance on any of the trains. That's other questions I've had from folks recently, and of course we've had them all the whole time we've been looking at Railway Empire. But we'll talk about maintenance here in a little bit when I start dealing with it. Just some quick comments on what it does for you or doesn't do for you. But you'll notice all this progress we're making, all this money we're making, and by the way, if you haven't paid attention, we're way ahead of schedule. I mean, it's April of 1851. We've got to like 1854 to do these tasks, I think. So, you know, we're way ahead of schedule. So this is working beautifully. There, I finally punch in and go get some maintenance. I started to get that museum train and decided, nah, I'm not going to change. I'm going to keep running to Philadelphia. So why get that? Why not get something else that would help us? And you'll notice our money is starting to come in much nicer now. We're starting to rock and roll on the money. So we've got this dedicated line coming in with cotton into Toledo. So we're setting up our signals and getting it ready to go. So we'll run 4 trains to make sure we keep a steady supply coming in there. And now we're looking good. And we've got one more business to do, I think it is. And there's an easy one right there. We've got veggies that we can just run straight into Toledo. We can just tie it off with that line that's already there. It won't cost us that much to do it. And bingo, there's our task done. And we can make profit and help Toledo grow by bringing vegetables into Toledo. And we could have done this, of course. This could have been another pass-through line. We could have actually come out of this, run through that veggie farm, and then back over to Grand Rapids, and then come back the other way. That would have been just fine, but you know, we're not really trying to grow Grand Rapids so much. We're trying to grow Toledo. So as long as Grand Rapids is getting wheat and supplying beer to Toledo, we're happy with Grand Rapids. So we just want to make sure we're pumping everything we can into Toledo. So we're taking the shortcut here, just doing a direct line. But again, if you could picture it, just run a line up through that vegetables on over to Grand Rapids, and then run trains back and forth. A couple of trains running back and forth on that line would work great. So here we are. We're getting good lumber delivery into Rock Island already. We've got like over halfway there on that delivery, and again, it's only June of 1851. So we're looking good there. We're getting growth in Toledo, and now we're checking to see what else they could use. They could use some. We're going to start getting vegetables. That's good. Toledo is growing. Excellent. Here's another case where I forgot to supply towers, but easily rectified. That's an important line, and it really shouldn't have forgotten supply towers on that one. And you see a little bonus connection there for cotton. I think we'll do something with that here in a minute. But now we're still thinking about growing Toledo. So I'm going to actually put in a separate station. Could have expanded that station that exists, but it's cheaper to put in the separate one. And run it up here to Toledo so we can get logs going directly into Toledo. Again, we got to grow Toledo to 100,000. It's growing, it's doing nicely, but we want to make sure it grows. And logs are fundamental. Logs are one of the big six, the early six that you need. And so we want to make sure we get those logs in there. Now, for those of you who are newer to the game, what you just saw me do there is flatten out that bridge, get rid of those big trenches we were digging. You make sure you do that and get the price of your lines down. There's no reason to have a bunch of bridges and tunnels and big trenches in the earth if you can avoid it. You really want your lines as straight and simple as you can get them. Avoid bridges and tunnels as much as you possibly can. Keep those lines cheap, but still at the same time keep them so they don't have big inclines in them, so your trains can move on them. But really pay attention to that, because you can waste so much money by not paying attention to it. And I usually waste a certain amount of money every game just by being a little sloppy, because I get so ahead. Everything's going so well, I get a little sloppy. That's one of my faults as a player, one of my many. So now we're going to set up the log line, run logs directly into Toledo, make sure it gets a good supply, help it grow, and we'll make money on it too. That's probably overkill to run that many trains, but anyway. And now, since we've got that line and we know they need fruit, there's fruit nearby, so why don't we just circle around here and link up with that line and run some fruit trains into Toledo. So now we finish off our double track down to that merge and back to the fruit and have it ready to go. And we can just run fruit down there on on the log line into Toledo and make sure there's one more need that's met. And now we notice that Toledo is over 60,000. Should have done this a little bit ago, but it's over 60,000 now. And so we can put in that magic elixir of growth, the museum, my favorite building in Railway Empire. So we'll put in a museum in Toledo. Now that'll give it 10% bump on demand satisfaction and help it to grow. And you can see here we finished off our first two. We're making good progress on our lumber. So let's stop right here and we'll pick this back up in part 2. So this whole thing will be 2 parts, and you can see we're even now starting to think about optional task of buying out a competitor. So let's stop right here and we'll come back and finish this off in part 2. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it'll help you become a better player, and I hope you'll join us for our next Railway Empire video. Thank you.